looking for political correctness, you've come to the wrong place. It's Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy, 103.9 LI News Radio.
Hey, welcome to our show, folks. This is Speak Out Long Island with former County Executive Steve Levy, and we welcome you on this live broadcast here at MacArthur Airport. And we're asking anyone out there in Suffolk County who wants to chime in during the course of the show to please feel free to join us in the conversation. We're at 631-451-1039. It's easy to remember. The 1039 is the same digits of this radio station, Long Island News Radio at 103.9 FM. So that's 451-1039. We're going to have Tom Barriger, a local legislator, true fiscal conservative, joining us at the 2:30 hour. And then at 3 o'clock, we're going to have Jim Morgo, a former Chief Deputy County Executive of mine. He was the former president of the Long Island Housing Partnership, a very well-known individual within the scene in Suffolk County, both the business and the community scene. So we're going to get his perspective on a number of issues, possibly a call-in from Andrea Vecchio from TaxPack as well. Talk about what's going up in Albany right now and how it's going to affect our taxes. The thing I wanted to talk about in this first 20 minutes here is something very prevalent in the news over the last 2 weeks, and that is water. And make no mistake, there is a great deal of politics that revolves around the issue of water. First, we had a couple of weeks ago at the County Executive Ballone's State of the County address, it being centered on we're in crisis, water's in crisis, we're all going to die from lack of clean drinking water, and I'm going to do something about it, so he says. And it makes for very big news. And next week, this past week, you have Dick Amper from the Pine Barrens Society on Jay Oliver's show yesterday on this very station saying how he's suing both Balone and my former administration for making changes to this program. So, first of all, why the crisis? There's some insight I want to pass along to you that you might not get just from reading a newspaper or hearing something on a local news program with a soundbite. Here's the deal. Politicians love to talk about clean water because it's mom, it's apple pie, it's Chevrolet. Everyone can rally around this topic. It's like, who's against education? I'm pro-education. Who's for war? I'm anti-war. Who's against the elderly? I'm pro-elderly. I'm pro-environment. Well, of course, who isn't? Who's going to say that they're anti-environment or anti-clean drinking water? But when you talk about it, it becomes a great distraction from the real crucial issues of the day where tough decisions have to be made. So in that State of the County address, you did not hear anything about the county executive taking certain steps to balance his budget that were very questionable. One of the things that he had talked about last year was stopping the county's payments on its debt service. What do I mean by that? You have a $200,000 mortgage on your house. You know you have to pay a certain amount every month to stay current with that mortgage. What the county executive suggested is, let's just stop paying that monthly payment. And he was going to seek legislation from Albany to allow him to do that. It would have been unprecedented. It would have been remarkably irresponsible. It would have killed our bond rating, but it would have been in line with some of the other steps that they were taking to kick the can down the road, such as selling off the H. Lee Dennison building, which we owned, only to be renting back starting next year, bonding out salaries, which was never done before. This is all ironic because the county executive chief deputy was on with Jay Oliver on Thursday, noting how this new administration doesn't use one-shots anymore, uses far less one-shots than previous administrations, when the fact is this new administration is the king of one-shots, has now used more than all the other county administrations in the past combined. But the one that is relevant here to clean drinking water is the proposal that would have delayed our debt. Why is that relevant? Because the legislature, the county legislature, when they got the county executive's budget, in their wisdom said, and they don't always get it right, but in this case, the county legislature got it right and said, this is nuts. We are not going along with this proposal that we stop making our debt payments. It would be the first time in our history. It would be a terrible signal. It's just bad news, bad economic policy. So they said, in lieu of that, let's instead borrow money from the Sewer Stabilization Reserve Fund. Now, you could say that was a good idea or a bad idea, but that's what they did, which was probably a better idea than what the county executive had suggested. They change it. The county executive signs that change, and it becomes law. So then, Dick Amper from the Pine Barren Society, one of the wackos from the extremist wing of the environmental groups out there, so I'm bringing a lawsuit. Fine, you want to bring a lawsuit, that's okay. But don't lie to people. Don't mislead people as to the genesis of your lawsuit. He also brought a lawsuit against my actions several years ago when we made changes to the program that actually improved the environment. Here is what Dick Amper said this referendum and this lawsuit is going to be doing. Cue it, fellas.
This is a very simple a matter. The public voted. This is not something government did. The public voted at referendum on 5 separate occasions to allow 1/4 of a penny in sales tax revenue to be used to improve drinking water.
Well, that's partially true. There was some of that money from the quarter penny that went toward improving drinking water. In fact, a big chunk of it went toward buying open space for preservation, both for aesthetic purposes and to preserve future drinking water, and to clean up our rivers, lakes, and tributaries, etc. Okay? But that alone does not tell the whole story. There is also another segment of that plan which reserves about 1/3 of that money coming in for property tax relief. That wasn't said. And then there's another portion, which he did talk about, which was for sewer stabilization money, but they're never mixed, okay? So the money that went towards sewer stabilization, and that was to stabilize rates for people who live in sewer districts for the next 20 years, that has nothing to do with buying open space or building new sewers or cleaning septic systems. It's simply to keep a cap on the amount of increases that would inure to people who were in sewer districts. And the reason that was done back in the 80s is it was an east-west kind of a battle in the legislature. It was understood that the East End was going to benefit the most from the open space program, which is true. Most of the property has been out east. And West End legislators said, well, we have our sewers here, and they're going to go through the roof with the rates because of the Southwest Sewer District costs, so let's even it out, put some money towards stabilization. And then they said, let's put some money toward property tax stabilization as well, as long as we're getting this money in. Fine and good. But what Amper now says is he misleads the public into believing that money is being taken from the open space program or the water purification program for other purposes. It's absolutely not true. So why would an environmental like this make such a claim, a false claim? Well, here's why. They have to stay relevant. They have to stay relevant by creating crisis, by creating fear in the public. So what they're going to do now is mobilize hundreds of people, usually young kids who go, college kids in the summer, who knock on your door and say, did you hear that they're going to poison your water? Please sign this petition. Now, I know in my case, at my home, I've had many of these folks knocking on my door in the past saying, oh, there's going to be a development around the block. It's going to poison your water. We're going to clean it up. And by the way, would you like to write a donation to our group? Okay. And many of those donations go for the salary of the people who run the group. And that's what a lot of this stuff is within the environmental community. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a number of really good, reputable organizations. I mean, Bob DeLuca, who's also involved in this from the Group for the East End, good, reputable organization. Citizens Campaign for the Environment, reputable organization. Nature Conservancy, reputable organization. The Pine Barrens, I think, is way, way out there. Very difficult to deal with a guy like Amper. He doesn't compromise. It's all his way, and he uses these scare tactics. And if you don't bow to his altar, you are the enemy, and they will attack you ad infinitum. But the point is, too many people are intimidated by this. So they do this for the purposes of staying relevant. I'll give you another example. Bill O'Reilly, in his book, The No Spin Zone, had a chapter about Jesse Jackson. And he talked about how Jesse Jackson would go to some of these big companies, big Fortune 500 companies, and say, oh, that faux pas that you just did, we're going to force a boycott on all your sales unless you make good. Well, what was making good, according to these people's representations to O'Reilly? Well, if you sit down and settle and give a sizable chunk of donation to the Rainbow Coalition, which Jesse Jackson ran and gets paid from, it goes away. Well, that would happen a lot, according to the O'Reilly book. I've been told by many folks that they fear that same kind of thing happens with some of these groups out there, where if you have a particular development that's coming up, if you go and sponsor their gala for $25,000, all of a sudden the objections that were previously there, they're not there so much anymore, you know? So I'm not saying this happens all the time. I'm not saying there's anything illegal in the way these conversations take place, but it certainly is out there by many of these folks who say that some of the motives of some of these organizations are often suspect. And that is certainly the case here with this referendum. The ultimate irony is Amper tries to make it sound like the program that we implemented back in 2011 was anti-environment, and that he was going to be bringing this suit to take money and put it back into the Clean Water Fund. Roll it on this one.
These things can be combined. The funds can be restored to water protection. The public is the beneficiary of that, and we can go forward.
The funds can be restored to water protection. There were never any funds taken away from water protection. Let me tell you what happened a few years ago. It was 2011. My budget analysts and I were combing through the budget, and they told me, hey, you know what? The quarter penny program, which had a big chunk for open space program and a big chunk for sewer stabilization and property tax relief, the sewer stabilization component, we have hundreds of millions of dollars of extra money. The purpose of that fund was to stabilize the sewer rates for the next 20 years. We can take this amount of money and stabilize them way beyond that. But even after you did that, we have a couple of $100 million left over. It wasn't doing anything. It was just sitting there. You couldn't use it for building more sewers to clean the environment. You couldn't use it for improving septic systems. You couldn't use it for open space. It was just sitting there. So I sat down with environmental groups, the Nature Conservancy and the Citizens Campaign for the Environment, and we wrote a bill together to say, let's take some of that dormant money and put it toward building more sewers, improving the present sewers that we have that are discharging nitrogen into our waterways, helping people improve their septic systems. The environmentalists loved it. We took a separate portion of it and helped over the next 10 years keep control over property taxes. Everybody knew what we're doing. They were on board. On top of that, they appeared at the press conference with me. So this was a program supported by environmentalists for the environment. It passes. So some of the money was used to allay property tax increases. And where'd the other money go? To build the Ronkonkoma Hub, the sewers that Steve Ballone is bragging about, that it's going to the Ronkonkoma Hub. Where did that money come from? From the change in the program that we implemented. Not a penny of it came from open space purposes, from clean water purposes. It was all the excess money in that stabilization fund, but that is never said by Dick Amper. So the whole premise of this referendum and this lawsuit is a lie. It was saying that money was taken from clean water purposes for non-clean water purposes. Just the opposite. It was money that was sitting in there dormant in a fund that was to be used only to stabilize rates. We had the rate stabilized for the next 20 years. We said, let's put it to good use. You hear the county executive now talking about we want to put sewers in Mastic Shirley. Where's that money coming from? It's coming from the money we set aside from the bill we passed in 2011. That's the ultimate irony. Here's Amper saying this is against the environment when, in fact, our program was for the environment. Now, fast forward to this past year where the legislature said, we're going to take that money not for new sewers, not for new septic systems, but purely to borrow it to plug the hole. Okay, you could say you don't like it, but it's hard to say that that was illegal, and it's harder to say that it's taking money from drinking water. That is not true. One thing that Amper is right about, the legislature and Boulogne said, oh, we're going to pay this money back. They never put any wording in there to say it would have to be paid back. They just took it and made a promise, a verbal promise, we'll put it back. But here's a quote where now Amper is lauding Boulogne for saying, oh, Boulogne doesn't want this, and he's going to work with us to change it. Check this quote out.
The Boulogne administration appears to want to fix that. In our conversations, they're saying this should not have happened.
Should not have happened. Then why did you sign the bill? Why did you sign the budget bill? If you thought it was bad to take this money and to use it within your budget in a general fund, why didn't you veto it? You had every opportunity to do so. So now you in the Boulogne administration became part of this. So why is Amper gushing, in this regard? Because the administration is bowing at his feet. And that they're pretty scared of him, as most of them are. In fact, when Amper brought suit against my administration wrongfully, the other environmentalists who had stood by me at the press conference and wrote the bill with me ran for the hills because they're very afraid of his wrath. This guy throws a lot of bombs. But make no mistake about it, folks, the whole premise is inaccurate. But then he lauds Boulogne about, well, he's dedicating his administration toward environmental improvement in nitrogen. Well, I look back to the comments in the State of the County and saying, well, what is it that is new here? What is so revolutionary? What is so great that it's giving us this promise? There was really nothing there. It was just a statement that we're in crisis, we've got to do something about it, and we're going to hire some folks to do a study as to who has to be hooked up to sewers. What? We know who has to be hooked up and who doesn't have to be hooked. We've known this for 20 years. You don't need to be giving tens of thousands of dollars of wasteful consulting money for someone to tell us something we already know. Oh, and then we're going to certify people who can improve septic systems. Well, fine. But what you're not telling people is we want to improve people's septic systems. At what? $20,000 to $30,000 a pop. That's what it will cost a homeowner to do the type of things that some of these environmentalists want done to a typical septic system. It's not real. If you want to make change, you've got to keep the program in place that we had passed in 2011 that freed up those hundreds of millions of dollars, in fact, for clean water. Right now, well, I should say before that, there was no money available within that fund. You had the Open Space Fund, and by the way, my administration had purchased or contracted for over 8,000 acres of new properties to be purchased and preserved. That's what you call preservation of our water supply. The new administration has brought that down to a trickle, and they've had no program to keep that particular money, revenue flow coming forward to continue that program. And here's Amper still slobbering over the new administration, yet whenever we were announcing more and more preservations, we preserved around 80 farms and all of these acres, several times the size of Central Park, it would always be, it's not enough, it's not enough, it's not enough. Part of it was the personal dislike that existed between myself and Mr. Amper. So when you're on that personal level of not getting along, nothing will be agreed upon. So even when you're doing a good job, it won't be recognized. But I think it's also the feeling of a lot of these environmentalists that no matter how much you do, it's never enough. And it's not just them, it's advocates in general. If we say we spent enough and we've done a good job, the momentum is off to get more money, or we then become irrelevant. But that's the same in a lot of other organizations out there as well, not just on the environment. And by the way, let me preface again, thank God for these environmental groups. You need them. You need them to be watchdogs. You need them to be focused on these issues and keep it in the limelight. The problem is some of the extremists get caught up in just their myopic view of life. So if they're shutting down any potential housing for young people, they don't care. It's not their issue. If they're making you pay $20,000 for an upgraded sewer system, they don't care. It's not their issue. If they are preventing any kind of a job creation, they don't care. It's not their issue. As long as their issue is taken care of, all else is fine. And that's the same with any other special interest group. It's the role of an elected official to be the balancing agent there. But what we've had too much of is just like some municipal unions that run roughshod through intimidation over elected officials, so too can a bombastic extremist such as Dick Amper. He intimidates a lot of folks out there. He never intimidated me, which is why we had our battles. But he can be an intimidator, and that's okay. But don't mislead the public. Don't tell the public that clean water money is being diverted when none of that money was slated for clean water in the first place. It was just sewer stabilization money. All right, we're going to be back in the next section with Tom Barraga, our local legislator, and we invite you folks to call, and we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff here about Suffolk County government. 451-1039. Join us back here on Long Island News Radio. We're back. Speak Out Long Island with former County Executive Steve Levy. New music. Looks like it was taken off the old WRCN file from there. Very cool, very cool. We're here live. We want you all to call in on our show at 631-451-1039 and in the studio for this half hour. A very good friend. A great public servant, county legislator, Tom Barraga. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Hey, it's great to be here, Steve.
And I have to say, I'm not just blowing smoke because Tom was good enough to come to the studio, but in my 26-year career in government, there were maybe, I can count on one hand, maybe two hands, with 10 fingers, the number of elected officials I felt were true fiscal conservatives. A lot of people talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. They refuse to stick their neck out and ever be the sole guy to say no. Tom Barraga has never had that problem. This is a man who, we agree on most things. We won't agree on everything, but you have to respect a man who is willing to say, this is what I believe, and this is what I'm going to say, this is how I'm going to vote. And I have to commend you for that, Tom. You're really one of the true believers, one of the few who I've come to know.
Thanks very much, Steve. And it's a pleasure being here, believe me.
Thanks. And, you know, we're kindred spirits in a way that I think we're both fiscal conservatives in that we see a lot of waste in government. And you were one guy who, when I was counting up who's going to be with us on these tough votes, we knew Tom Barraga would almost always be there. And if it wasn't, it was for a good reason that you had. But I remember when we were doing controversial things like having to close the nursing home, and everybody was hemming and hawing because of pressure from the union. Tom Barraga was there. When I made the move with the highway patrol and I was getting all kinds of grief from people who were doing the bidding of the PBA, Tom Barraga stood with us. When I suggested the rather controversial merger of the treasurer and the controller that didn't pass, but I still knew I had Tom Barraga on my side. And, some of those issues are still out there.
Well, in essence, those three issues really haven't gone away. In fact, you mentioned the Foley Nursing Home, because that has now resurrected itself all over again. It seems that we have like a negative love affair in the legislature and the county executive's office with the Foley Nursing Home. And I can remember when you were county executive, you pointed out to many of us that this particular operation was losing $1 million a month, all right? It was
a month, not a year, a month, folks.
A month. A tremendous cost factor associated with it as far as the county was concerned. And you went out and you went for a request for proposal, and you got a group, I think the last name of the individual, his name was Rosenberg. And he came in and basically offered $36 million for the facility.
Boom, could have done. Everybody stayed in their bed.
Everybody stayed in their beds. The employees had their jobs. In fact, there was even an amendment that for the first year, if the deal went through, the employees would continue to get the difference between what $11.99 was going to pay them, the union representing workers.
Thanks to you. That was your provision that you put in there.
It was a great deal. Yet the legislature fought it tooth and nail. And the whole year went by for the most part. At the last minute, the legislature approves the deal. But in the interim, the state of New York reduces the Medicaid reimbursement, all right? And these were basically Medicaid patients. And Rosenberg turns around and says, I went out of the deal. I want my money back.
Then, okay, we couldn't sell it now because they delayed it to such an extent. Then they said, all right, you're not going to let us sell it. I'm going to close it because at least we'll be able. So I put in my budget the laying off of all these people, and we're going to close it. Again, you support me. What was ironic is the legislature at the time allowed that to stay in the budget, the closure, took the money, diverted it to their pork projects, which you refused to do, and then sued us to stop us from closing the home. So it created the very first deficit that we ever had at the end of the year. I had 8 budgets, 7 of them all balanced, and 7 bond rating upgrades. The only one we had a problem with was the last year when the legislature pulled that stunt.
Then what develops? Under the new administration, they go out, request for proposal, and they get a group headed by an individual by the name of Sherman. He comes in and he says, look, I'm not going to give you $36 million. I'm going to give you $23 million. So right away, a $13 million loss out the window.
But it's still something.
But it's still something.
And you stop the bleeding. You stop the bleeding,
and he said basically the same thing as Rosenberg. Look, we'll take it over. We'll keep the employees. We'll keep the patients. Everything pretty much will run the same. You'll have $11.99 as the union. The legislature fought this tooth and nail. In fact, it's one thing for an elected official to oppose something. It's another thing to be an absolute obstructionist. And that's what developed with a number of my colleagues in the legislature. And in the end,
by the way, that was both sides of the aisle, which blows my mind. But
in the end, what happened there is that the $23 million deal went through, only to find out, Sherman finding out, that when he went to this rinky-dink board in Brookhaven, where he had to get basically permission to run it as a nursing home, they said, no, we're not going to give it to you. This is a 1-acre residential, only if the county owns it. So the deal was dead. So Sherman comes back and says, look, I can't buy it. What I'll do is that we'll lease it with the county. This way, we're still running it. Well, sounds like a pretty good deal. We're not going to get, the $23 million, but at least it's leased. At least the employees get to stay. The patients get to stay. So these obstructionist legislators, and I will not mention any names, decide, well, before you can go ahead with this, we should put it up for a vote. Let the employees vote on this deal. And the employees,
they bought into, they drank the Kool-Aid.
They drank the Kool-Aid. Over and over again in public debate, I told them, this is the best deal for you. I says, if this doesn't go through in 3 months, this place is going to be closed.
And they voted it down and shot themselves in the foot, and then they were out of a job.
126-9, they voted it down. Sherman is out, and the county executive did exactly what he was going to do.
Right.
In a month and a half, the place was basically shut down. The patients transferred. The employees gone. Now,
what a waste! What a waste of money! What a waste of grief on these patients! What a waste of jobs that didn't have to happen.
The next stage is you put it up for sale. Now we have one individual who's come in and said, look, I'll give you $11.5 million. All right. So now figure this. $36 million. Now we're down to $11.5 million. Roughly $23-24 million gone. The best we're going to do on this is $11.5 million. Then these same obstructionist legislators, they just never give up. They never take any responsibility for their actions. And their actions have been extremely negative when you take a look at the patient costs, when you take a look at the employees who lost their jobs, come up and say, well, maybe this would be good as a prison. Instead of building phase 2 for the county, let's make this thing a prison. So the Department of Public Works goes out.
How much did they spend on that study for them to come back and say, what, it was going to cost more than
$30 million more than building a brand new.
Right.
All right. But they're not finished. They turn around and says, the sheriff has indicated that he's got a lot of prison prisoners who have chemical problems, drug problems. Let's take a look at the feasibility of making it a drug center, an alcohol center. So at the meeting the other day with the Department of Public Works, I said to him, well, how much would it cost to do that, to convert this building over? At least $18 million. Now,
and the blood keeps on dripping from our veins.
If this ever happened, the $36 million on the revenue side is now gone.
Right.
And now on the expense side, you're building again another $18 million. And you know as well as I do, if it ever goes through, it'll never be $18 million. It'll be 30 or 40. So what we have on the face of it, if this never went through, is $54 million between revenues and expenses just going out the door.
Not to mention the tens of millions of dollars that were thrown down the drain over the 5-year period where these legislators were fighting the closure. All told, I'd say it's about $100 million that was squandered in this ridiculous process.
What puzzles me, and I tried to work with this administration, is the decision in the last week to postpone the sale of Foley to this one individual for 6 months. They apparently have sat down with him. He's willing to wait 6 months. Mm-hmm. Why?
Right.
Why? What is the purpose of that? Because DeMarco, Steve, when he says, look, we have individuals in our prison system.
Who's our sheriff? And by the way, you're listening to Tom Barraga, who is our local legislator. This is Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy, and you're welcome to call in and chime in at 451-1039. But go ahead, Tom.
When DeMarco says, I've got prisoners at the county level who need psychiatric assistance, that's true. But he is not unique. There are 62 counties in the state of New York. There are many county prisons that have the same problem. When you take a look at what used to be from a mental health perspective in terms of the larger institutions, now many prisons at the local level and the state level have a large number of criminals who need psychiatric assistance. Right. But that is not the fiscal responsibility of Suffolk County.
Absolutely
that is the fiscal responsibility of the ones who caused the problem, the state of New York, when they completely, and they continue to do it, downgrade mental health services at the state level to get it off their budget. Close the institutions.
And you know that.
Close the mental health care.
You were a state assemblyman for,
23 years.
Two decades. And you saw this all happen, and you were a critic, of those budgets constantly. But by the way, just a little tidbit I want to throw in that not a lot of people would know, but you mentioned how Brookhaven Town, one of their rinky-dink committees, voted against the zone change for that sale. We had spoken to then Supervisor Lesko, and we had our ducks in a row. We were going to get that vote when it ever came. Lesko left. Legislator Romaine became the supervisor there. You don't have to comment on this. He's got relatives who work in the nursing home. Next thing you know, that Brookhaven vote went down 5-0, and it killed the plan. But I'm not connecting any dots here, but it really was strange. But getting past that, what I loved about you was your help with us on the nursing home. I wish the new county executive would have campaigned on closing it. He didn't. He wasted a year, but eventually he came to the right decision. But I want to ask you. You were there on that. You were there on the controller bill. You were there on the highway. You're one guy. I really thought you should have been the minority leader because you could have given a voice to the Republican Party in Suffolk to stand for something. What I see now is really no rudder. I see a lot of things coming out of the executive branch, which it makes me shudder when I see them bonding for salaries, when I see them, talking about stopping the payment of our debt, things like this. There's only one or two voices that are out there. There's not a unified opposition. Do you ever give thought to being that guy or trying to help create a brand for the Republicans here so they're not just nebulous, one big blob?
I think the one thing the caucus is doing, the Republican caucus, and this came about based on a meeting we had about a month ago. As you all remember when you were in the State Assembly, when you were in the minority, one thing you did do, at least we did, and I'm sure you did in the majority as well, you had public hearings on different issues throughout the state. We've never done that in Suffolk County. And my suggestion was, let's initiate 3 or 4 particular Republican task forces and go out on different topics and get input from people. For example, the task force that I now head, and we just had a meeting in West Islip where we had over a dozen speakers, deals with the taxation of the budget. What this task force is looking for are new innovative ideas to help stabilize for the general fund tax. Or if you want to spend money, everybody wants to spend money, tell me where you anticipate getting the money. What we're looking for are new innovative ideas, and a certain number of ideas did come. But that's the way I think a minority begins to stand out from a media perspective. Because you're right.
Get those ideas out there, like I was saying in the break. It's one thing to say you're against Obamacare. It's another thing to say, here's our alternative to Obamacare.
That's right. I mean, we, under your administration, and even so far under this one, the general fund has been basically stabilized. But you know something? We need innovative ideas that if we have to, where do we generate new revenues? And what's the best methodology of doing that? You know, right now you're hearing a lot about, well, let's put it this way. At some point in time, somebody came up with the STAR program, all right? It was innovative. It's helped a great number of people over the years. At some point, somebody came up, whether you agree or not, the vehicle and parking traffic violations, that's going to generate revenues. The Republican delegation out here to the state legislature made sure they carved out the VLTs for Nassau and Suffolk. What we're looking for are new, fresh ideas, not the tax people.
VLTs are the video
lottery terminals.
Lottery terminals. Slot machines, basically.
Slot machines.
Right. At our OTBs.
Yeah.
Right.
We're not here. Our people are so damn hard-pressed economically. They can't afford to pay any more taxes.
Well, let me tell you, what about this as being one of the first proposals from this group for consideration? Put in a bill to require that the county executive not appeal the court decision of last week, which sided with the sheriffs, actually sided with the pact that I made with the sheriffs back in 2011, that they could remain on the highways. That saved $12 million a year. I mean, there was a tax increase in the police district fund last year because the cops who were on the highway, the cops who were not on the highway, who were in the street, went back onto the highway, and you had to replenish those positions from the street, so that's a tax increase. If you had those cops back in the street and the sheriffs went back to that, you're handing it on a silver platter to the executive. Why would he appeal that? Is that something that might be considered by the caucus?
I think it might be considered by the caucus. The reality is the big difference between putting in a bill, which we could, and actually getting it passed.
Right.
And I think the majority, frankly, in the legislature, the Democrats, are pretty much in line on this issue with the county executive. But
I still think it would be good, even if it can't get passed, to say, this is what we stand for. But you're an anomaly. You're not really, a lot of people think that Republicans feel this way, Democrats feel this way. You see that stark difference. We both served in the assembly together. You a lot longer than I. There's a stark difference. I mean, the Republicans actually sit on one side of the aisle. Democrats sit on the other side of the aisle. And 90% of the votes are one party this and one party that.
Yeah, my
Suffolk,
job,
it's all over the place.
Yeah, and my job as ranker on Ways and Means at the time was to go out there against Andy Farrell, who was the chairman, and point out the negatives associated with your one House bill or the governor's bill if you happen to be a Democrat. In fact, the biggest challenge that I had when I was in the state assembly is that it was easy to go out and criticize the majority Democrats on the floor or Governor Cuomo, Mario Cuomo at the time. But it became a little more difficult when I still faced the majority of Democrats on the floor of the assembly. But now I had a Republican governor called George Pataki. I had to sort of couch my remarks.
All right, well, hang there. We got some calls coming in now. We've got Rick from Oakdale, who's joining us on Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy, and our guest here is Tom Barraga. Welcome to the show, Rick.
Well, how are you, Steve? Good to talk to you
Excellent.
guys.
Thanks so much. Hey, tell us what's on your mind, Rick.
Well, I'll preface this. I voted for you 3 times, once for the Assembly, twice for county exec, so this is not unfriendly fire.
Okay.
Somebody voted for you. What seems to get overlooked in this sheriffs over the cops on the expressway and Sunrise Highway, this started back when you and Tom Swazi had a joint conference that you were going to take off 25% of the patrols every 3 months and force the state to
Boy, you have a good memory.
I really do. And now the first 3 months passes, and you, in fact, do what you're going to say, which to me was a ballsy decision. It really was, to actually do it. But then the second 3 months come, and instead of doing what you said you were going to do, you swap the cops out for the deputy sheriffs, in sort of what was, I don't want to say sneaky, but it was certainly stealthy. It was kind of done on a Friday night.
You're right, and I'll tell you why when you conclude. Yes, absolutely.
Finish my question. So my question is, 2 questions. Number one, when the second 3 months came along, why didn't you continue? Whether it was putting aside whether it was a deputy or a cop, why didn't you continue removing the patrols like you said? And the second thing is, if it was such a good idea to put the deputies in place of the cops, why didn't you do it in the light of day as opposed to sort of like a stealth?
Really good questions, and I'm going to tell you straight up. You may agree or disagree, but here's what it is: when I did it with Swazi, we were trying to get the state to give us money because, and Tom Barraga will agree, This is a state highway. I mean, if you look at you drive up to Albany, you're on the New York State Thruway. It's state troopers there throughout the entire, throughout the whole state. The state guys patrol their own roads. Only here in Nassau and Suffolk did you have the anomaly where our local guys were doing this big turf war going way back. So we said, look, you guys pay for it. This is our ultimatum, and we're going to yank them. Now, in the meantime, I was involved in really close negotiations with David Patterson's people. Michael Balboni, in fact, who was then Homeland Security Director. I had known Mike very well. We went to law school together. We had an agreement that they were going to give us the money, or not give us money, but they were going to put the highway, the state police on these roads. Then the PBA from Suffolk had an in with Bill Cunningham, who had run against me in 2003. They had endorsed him. He was the number one man for David Patterson. They got to him. He got to Patterson. It unraveled. So when that unraveled, we were stuck. Now, we had to make a choice. We either take our cops off and leave the roads bare, which would have been a very risky thing to do, or put the sheriffs in there in the interim to see if we can continue to get the state money. We put the sheriffs in. It worked very well. Now, why did we do it stealthy, as you say? Good point. In a perfect world, Rick, I would have preferred to say, hey, guys, we're going to do this in a week or a month down the road. You know what would have happened? I guarantee this would have happened, Rick, and we knew this. The minute the PBA found out that we were going to do this, they would have been in court with an injunction preventing us from doing it. And once you get that injunction, it's very hard to implement. If you do it first and then they've got to reverse it, it's very hard for them to reverse it. So I did feel bad for a lot of the guys who were told the same day, hey, you're being switched. It bothered me. But unfortunately, we made the decision with our lawyers and all involved that if we leaked it out, we'd never get it accomplished. I don't know if you agree with me on that, Rick, but I thought you were owed an explanation.
Okay, thanks so much.
Okay, thanks, Rick.
Bye.
And so there you have it with that, Tom. It's still it's still an issue.
Still an issue
today, and the comptroller treasurer also an issue. But we've got two big issues coming up, and I only got a minute left here. But what's your thought on raising the smoking age for buying cigarettes to 21? I'm torn on this. I kind of think if you're old enough to fight in a war, even though these things are bad for you,
I think you make a point. I'm going to vote against it. I think most of my colleagues on the Republican side will also be casting negative votes. I think the argument...
Well, there's at least the Republicans are standing for something. People might not agree with it, but...
What you have to remember here, I think when you hear the debate, you hear the argument of all the adverse effects associated with smoking, all right, all the cancers that it causes, all the related diseases, there is only one conclusion that you can logically come to. You should ban smoking in the United States, ban smoking in Suffolk County. But that is not the conclusion of this particular bill. Because you cannot ban it, because of the tobacco securitization, the tobacco settlements, the generation, the economic elements associated with it, you can't ban it. The old Henry
ban it. They're legalizing pot.
Right. The old Henry...
It's easier to get pot now than cigarettes.
But what happens is, instead of going for the ban, which is the logical conclusion of the argument, they tie it into age.
Right.
19 and 20-year-olds. And as you pointed out, at 19 and 20, you can make... You are perfectly legal. You can get married. You join the service. You're more than capable of making a decision. And frankly, when you say 19 and 20-year-olds shouldn't be buying cigarettes because it has a negative influence on teenagers are already down on cigarette smoking.
Well, folks, if you want to hear more of the wisdom that comes out of the mouth of Tom Barraga, and he is great to listen to, go down to a county legislative meeting. You'll be impressed. Tom, thanks so much for joining us. Come back with us at the next hour, folks.
For political correctness, you've come to the wrong place. It's Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy, 103.9 LI News Radio.
Welcome back, folks, to Speak Out Long Island with former County Executive Steve Levy. We're live. We welcome your input to call in at Long Island News Radio 451-1039. We're here for another hour, and with us will be Jim Morgo, who I have to qualify as friend, former mentor. Jim was the county legislator back in 1983 who decided to hang it up because he went to one too many Eagle Scouts and couldn't stand it anymore.
It was a little bit more than that, but yeah, that's it.
And I was some 25-year-old punk kid who said, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring, and Jim was a mentor. Jim went on to be, so if you don't like me, he's the guy to blame. He started it. And then from there, he went on to be a major player on Long Island, being the head of the Long Island Housing Partnership. And then I was so enthralled with this mentor that I brought him back to be the chief deputy county executive who did wonders for Suffolk County over that time. So welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you, Steve. I want you to know that when I left the legislature and endorsed you, remember there was an opponent for the Democratic nomination, but you were the most energetic, hard-working kid that I had ever seen. You had actually worked in my campaign with your mom and dad. Right. And that was before any Democrat won that district. I know I'm reminding you that you were a Democrat back then. I don't know if you're going to stay here for the whole radio show because I heard you don't stay long at any one party.
But he had that line.
I know, I worked on it.
Oh, wait a minute. It was 20-something years that I was there. But, let's talk about that a little bit. The reason I ran away from the Democratic Party, I shouldn't say that. I'm going to use the Reagan line. The party left me. I didn't leave the party. And I'm glad you're here because we're friends. I respect your intelligence so much. And we agree on so many things. But we still have some disagreements philosophically. You're more left of center. I'm more right of center now. But I want to get into things like the DREAM Act, illegal immigration where we disagree, and a whole bunch of other things. But you know what? Well, we got a guy calling in.
Okay.
Let's get his point of view. Maybe he'll be talking about this or other things that we talked about earlier. We got Mike from Southampton chiming in. So, Mike, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hi, Steve.
Hi.
I have a question. I know you weren't around for it, but what do you think of the sheriff department making a second police department in Suffolk County? I know the people on the 5 eastern towns. We pay into the headquarters tax, and then the 5 western towns also pay into the police district tax.
Boy, you are prophetic. I didn't put you up to this, Mike. But, and I'm going to ask Jim to comment on this, too. It's very interesting what you're saying. What about the sheriffs being a second police department? What about this? I actually have, let me tell you this. Go ahead.
We have our own police department.
Right. Well, not only do you have your own police department, Mike, but if you go outside of Nassau and Suffolk, the majority of New York State, they don't have police departments. Their criminal activities are actually handled by the sheriff. You only have 5 police departments. You have Albany, you have New York City, you have Nassau, Suffolk, and you have 1 or 2 others. But the other places, it's the sheriffs who do that kind of work. I actually wrote an op-ed. Let me say this to you, and I want your comment. I wrote an op-ed, and I haven't published it yet, but it says, if we're really in desperate times, is it time to consider doing away with a Long Island Police Department, Suffolk and Nassau, and having sheriffs do it so you can start from scratch? They go through the same training, the same academy, and they're paid $42,000 less. Not that I have a problem with the work of our police force. I think they do a great job. But the contracts are so outrageous. If we're not going to get any changes, abolish it. Start fresh with a sheriff's department doing this work. Let the guys who are in there now stay in the police department, grandfather them out, and maybe we can start fresh and save on our taxes. Am I crazy, Mike?
Well, being on the East End, which is very different, we're very happy. Well, I don't say everybody is very happy with our own police department.
And they have the same training as the PD, and people don't realize this on the West End, but sheriffs are out there in the East End and have been for decades. Jim, what do you think about
But Mike's
this?
point is that Southampton has its own police
They have their own
department.
police force.
Southold has its own police force. East Hampton has its own police force, and
we
several
don't
of the villages.
We don't compare with the Suffolk County Police. We have 100 officers in Southampton Town Police, and the county has 2,300.
Yes. Now, one of the difference, though, one of the things you have to be clear about, though, is, people think, oh, well, these village cops, they're not making too much money because, they're not in the PD. They've got mandatory arbitration. You've got guys in Amityville making $150,000, $170,000 a year. They've had 10 violent acts last year, and they're making huge money. Now, the town guys, depending on whether they have mandatory arbitration, they're either going to be paid very little or a lot. So that's really the key. Do they have mandatory arbitration? But certainly, if we made a change to an entity that didn't have mandatory arbitration, we'd be a lot better off.
What do you think of redundancy, though? Dave Capel eliminated the Greenport police and had Southold take over, which was difficult, but apparently turned out very well for the village of Greenport.
Well.
Say it again?
Personally, I like the little police departments. Things are different. It's more, you know the officers know you. Because like in Southampton, we only have 100 guys. You know, that doesn't compare to the 2,300 that the county has.
Well, it's natural that the county's going to be a bigger force because it's covering so much more area. But as you say, the problem is the bigger your force, the bigger the bureaucracy, the smaller and the closer it is to you, the more control you have over it. And it's a very good point. You know, I don't see this happening, but if we get so desperate that there's a refusal to make any changes in these crazy contracts, maybe this idea will pick up. We'll see. But
we're paying for the sheriff out of the general budget.
Yes, you do. That is correct. And the sheriffs do a lot of work out on the East End, so that I think that's fair. But you know, you're not paying the horrific police tax, which is really on some, you know, just a West Ender will pay about $100 for their general fund, as you do out in Southampton. For your county general fund, it's not a lot. Yeah. What West Ender also pays is $1,000, $1,200 just for their police tax, which thank God you don't have to pay.
Right. So if the county police took over, let's say the East End, our taxes would skyrocket.
Absolutely, that's not going to happen, though. That is, if anything, it would be the reverse. I cannot see Suffolk County stretching into the East End. It's just not going to happen, Mike. But listen,
no, we would never allow it.
No, and rightly so. Rightly so.
If you go like in the village of Southampton, if you were like a chief of the fire department, you get an escort to the cemetery. Just call up the village police and say, "Hey, Chief so and so died. Could we just get an escort?" No, from the car. The county doesn't get into
You
that.
could sometimes do that, but frankly, you know, it's a lot of resources to do it. But when it's on a local level, it's a little easier to handle. You know. Right. But listen, Mike, great thoughts. Okay. Thank you. You might be reading about this more in the future. Be on the lookout for an op-ed on that. So.
All right. When are you going to run again?
I'm having too much fun playing with my grandkids. Let me tell you that. I'm going to talk.
I don't blame you.
Thank you. And by the way, this job, this radio station, gives me the opportunity to vent all of my political frustration. So it gets it out, and then I go home and say, "Okay, thank God for that for another week." So. Thanks so much, Mike. Take care. We'll hear from you again soon.
You know, as I get older, the idea of having an escort to the cemetery is not a perk I want to think about. You know, Steve, when you were talking, though, earlier about...
and again, you're listening to Jim Morgo, former Chief County Executive, and this is the Speak Out Long Island show with Steve Levy, and we want you to chime in, folks, at 451-1039, and back to you, Jim.
When you were talking about more liberal and left of center, right of center, whatever, the thing that I... for a very short time, enjoyed working in government, working with you, was that ideologies are irrelevant. Philosophy, especially on the local level. You want to get stuff done.
Right.
And then when I was listening to the earlier conversation you had with Tom Barraga, I was getting very depressed when you went over the nursing home saga. Because I was a union guy. I have friends in the union. Keeping the nursing home open was crazy.
Because even if you had liberal thoughts that, hey, I want money to go toward health center. I want money to go to feed the poor, to help the elderly. You know, it's being wasted. It's being I don't have that money to do these things.
And that's why this fellow who just called in, he talked about the effectiveness on the local level. I know you've had a mutual friend on, Paul Paunieri. Now, he's got no political ideology. He wants to he's an enrolled Democrat, but so what? So were you. He wants to get things done for his village. And you look at a problem, and one of the things about radio shows, not like this radio show, but the Rush Limbaughs and the Fox and the MSNBCs, what side they're on, they want quick, easy solutions to complex problems.
They want controversy. They want
that's right.
black and white.
What you call Tom a true believer. Right. That term makes me nervous, a true believer, because I think of the history of true believers. Yeah. What you really want is practical people who can solve problems.
That's good, but what I meant by true believer, I mean he has a core.
Yeah,
and you want to have a core with flexibility. You don't want someone who's all over the map without a core. You don't want someone who's unflexible and won't bend like a Rand Paul. You want someone who has beliefs but wants to get things done and knows compromise is so important to get there.
Well said. That's exactly.
Well, what I loved about you was a guy who wanted to get things done. I think you're one of the greatest one of the greatest public servants we ever had in Suffolk County, because you helped change the dynamic about economic development. Growth, dirty word to a lot of these. I started this show off blasting some of the extremist environmentalists who are suing Suffolk County over the change we made to the sewer program. And they're trying to claim that we're usurping money from water quality, which is exactly the opposite. We spent $1 billion on preserving our open spaces. None of that was touched. We had money segregated in this sewer stabilization fund. We already stabilized the rates. There was that $200 million extra dollars sitting there. So you, myself, others, we said, let's put it to good use. Let's build more sewers. Let's improve our septic systems. Let's actually enhance the environment. And you got these nutcases trying to stop us from doing that in the name of the environment.
Explain something to me. Yeah. If they're successful in this suit, the money that's already been designed for new sewers in Northport, extending the village of Patchogue, creating the Ronkonkoma hub, what happens?
It goes back. It dries up. And that's what I'm saying. What is your end here, Mr. Amper? And by the way, environmentalists helped us write the bill. Adrian Esposito from Citizens Campaign for the Environment, Kevin McDonald from the Nature Conservancy, they wrote the bill. They stood at the press conference with it. Amper did not. But now Amper's all bent out of shape. His knickers are in a twitch because he wasn't there. He's going to bring a suit and stop it. So you win. What have you done? You've hurt the environment and you've hurt economic growth. Economic growth and the environment can be compatible, and that's what you've always said. That's what I like.
Exactly. The fact that Suffolk County, 70% of Suffolk County doesn't have sewers, and we walk on our water. We depend on an aquifer.
We've been walking on water.
Yeah, I've tried that. I fell in. Yeah.
I knew you were a religious guy, but I didn't know you went to that extent. Yeah.
The thing about it's just crazy that we don't have sewers. Remote places in Kansas have sewers.
But you know what's funny? I've heard some of these same environmentalists say they don't want sewers. And you know why?
Because of development.
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
And that was their argument. As long as you don't have sewers out there, you can't have development, they won't come. And now they're complaining, some of them, that we don't have enough sewers. You can't have it both ways.
One of the things that we talked about a lot was redevelopment. You take blighted areas and you redevelop them, but you can't do
Pilgrim
that.
State, what we've done, the Quorum site, the Quorum movie theater was in our administration. Yeah. We started that, and it's coming to fruition now through
downtown Patchogue.
Downtown Patchogue.
That kind of stuff that Pontieri's done down there.
Right.
So you can do it. You can do transit-oriented development around railroad stations. But you're right. There are some no-growth people completely. Mm-hmm. And there are developers and there are developers.
Right. But, let me, and by the way, folks, if you want to chime in, it's 451-1039. Let's liven it up because we agree on so many things. One of the places we disagreed, and we always kept it, in a friendly, respectful conversation, was on the issue on illegal immigration. And it gets now to something that's in the news, the DREAM Act. They're talking about the governor's trying to put it in, the assembly's trying to put it in, the Republican Senate is trying to stop it. And, it sounds real good. We disagree on this, but it bugged me because I saw an article, here's Newsday, DREAM Act right for New York. And this is where the children who were illegal aliens who were children when they were brought over. And, it was no fault of their own. They were brought here. And the question is, should they get in-state tuition breaks and subsidies from taxpayers when they're going to our state universities? And here's Newsday saying, the Assembly estimated that it would cost about $27 million next year. No citizen would lose any aid. Well, that's so naive to say that, this really doesn't cost anything because kids who are there, won't lose aid. But there's only so much money in this pot. There's only so many seats within our state university system. And you know, you've got a guy who wrote on the blog, you know, after this article said, so I bust my butt working, saving, not buying fancy things, not going out to dinner, so I can put my kids through college, and now you tell me I have to pay for these kids. Now, it is unfair, you know, that a kid who was here not at fault of his own, you know, but life is not fair many times, and there are consequences when your parents come here illegally and you come here illegally. You know, it can't just be that, oh, well, let's just say, you know, you're here now, so we're going to have this tax subsidy. It's one thing if you want to say, we're not going to deport you, which I think there has to be deportation if you're going to enforce your law. But if you're not going to, now say, we're going to subsidize a person? I got to disagree with you, Jim.
Well, I'm not so sure I know that much about the New York program. I do know about the national program. And I do know that 15 states have DREAM Acts. And the qualifications are so circumscribed. That fellow who wrote in the blog, that's so typical of so many of the problems in this country, I think, because, of course, I work hard. Why should somebody get something for nothing?
He's not saying it's somebody for nothing. He's saying someone who's not here legally.
Well, it only applies to kids who came here when they were younger than 15, that are in good moral standing. Mm-hmm. And don't we want as many college-educated kids as we can get? Don't we want to put as many people in the armed forces, which had for a while before the recession, had declining enlistments?
But an armed force is not, that's not a subsidy. They're actually
no, but that's how they get.
The
that's how they get the DREAM Act benefits. That's how they get this.
I don't think that's tied here
to the New York
program. No, I don't believe so.
All right. Well, the New York program, and as I say, I know about the federal program. The New York program, I think, would probably work like the federal program. There'll be no Pell loans for anybody on the federal level. The person would have to show that he's making a contribution. The kid, he or she would have to show that he's contributing and, again, have no criminal record, be of upstanding moral status.
But that's like the whole immigration reform thing. You know, as long as you show that, you know, you didn't beat someone over the head, you can now stay, and they don't call that amnesty. But it was an illegal act to come here in the first place. Now I'm talking about the parents. And now we're just going to say, okay, so you can cut in line. You know, all these other people have been waiting for 10 years.
I don't think anybody's talking about cutting in line.
Well, then you're going to have to let everyone who's been online for 10 years in before these other people. And you're going to have, you know, 40 million more people into this nation.
What did you say about the Affordable Health Care later? If you don't like it, what's your solution? I have a
solution. You want to hear it? E-Verify for illegal immigration. People say, oh, you can't put all these people on buses. If you just enforced, the government just enforced E-Verify and told every business out there, not only prospectively but retroactively, you have to cross-reference your employees to this database. And if it doesn't match, they don't have a job. The problem is solved. People, as Mitt Romney said, will deport. And I know he took a shellacking for that. Give me a quick comment on that, and then we're going to go to Beth from Shirley.
Well, the fact of the matter is they will get jobs. They will just be hired by unscrupulous contractors.
But then they'll get banged from the government if they really wanted to.
Well, that's where the enforcement should be. Okay. Not against the person who's trying to survive, like, incidentally, to play the card that my dad did. Right. My dad came here from Italy. I have no idea if he were legal or not, but I know now his grandchild went to Harvard, that they have lawyers and doctors in the family. So, you know, not to play the American card, but that's the American tradition.
Oh, well, let's hear what Beth has to say from Shirley. You're calling us at 451-1039. Beth, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi.
So here's a question I have, and it's not that I'm not sympathetic to the fact that, yes, these children innocently were brought here illegally, and people want to do something for them. But by the same token, we have children that were born here in America whose parents, let's say, do things illegal. They might be in jail for all we know. Where are the programs for those children? Where are the programs where we have to take everybody into consideration, not just this one select group. One of my questions, because I don't know the answer to this, and I'm interested, as somebody who had 2 children go to college, my husband and I had to fill out all sorts of financial aid forms for them. We had to take out Parent Plus loans in order for our kids to go to college. They took out student loans, but we had to subsidize those loans based on our income.
Well, you are mirroring, Beth, you are mirroring, I'm sorry, it's Betty, right? Betty,
yes.
you're mirroring what that blog was in response to the editorial from Newsday, where I'm working my butt off.
I want to be specific, though, because what I want to say is a lot of these kids, the parents are here illegally and working off the books. Where is their verified income when these kids go and start applying for financial aid? Oh, well, I guess those parents won't have to be in debt for the next 10 years like I am.
Well, that's my point. There's only so much money.
And my income's verifiable, and therefore I have to pay for my children's education in concert with my children.
There's only so much money in that pot in government. And my point is, when you start taking and saying, hey, here it is, we want to be fair to this young person who's here illegally because it wasn't any fault of their own. Newsday's wrong to say that doesn't have an economic impact. It absolutely does. Someone else is not getting that money. And Jim, I know you disagree on this.
Well,
thanks, Betty. Thanks for joining us.
Illegal immigration has a economic impact. It hurts our taxes.
All right, we'll be right back, folks.
Someone said to me, anytime you get well, because it's this issue. Any
Hey, folks, welcome back. This is former County Executive Steve Levy. Welcome back to Speak Out Long Island with Steve Levy. We're live here at 451-1039. I'm here with Jim Morgo, former county legislator, former head of the Long Island Housing Partnership, former Suffolk County Chief Deputy County Attorney, and our phones have been ringing off the hook, especially since we were talking about the DREAM Act, and we're going to get back to some of those calls in a moment, but we have joining us Andrea Vecchio from East Islip Tax Pack. And Andrea, we asked you to call in to talk about what's going on right now as they're making sausage in Albany to determine whether or not we're going to get a tax cut coming down the road. Are you there, Andrea?
Yes, I am. Hi.
Great to be with you. Glad you're joining me, Steve Levy, and Jim Morgo.
Hi, Andrea.
And for those people who are calling in, hold on. As soon as we're done with this segment with Andrea, we're going to get to your calls. Andrea, what's going on up there? We hear that, the governor put in a proposal that if there's a surplus that develops down the road, and it's very speculative, but if so, that money would go toward shaving off any increases in taxes up to 2%. And now the Assembly is balking at this. What's going on with the state Assembly?
It's not just them. Both parties seem to be resisting this. And because it's not anything that's going to be permanent. It's an election year attempt to probably highlight what he said. This is a quote from him. The single most oppressive tax in the state is the property tax. And, of course, the school tax is the worst of the worst. And doing this is just going to delay things. You and I know, and reasonable people all know, that the only way to control, to make the cap work eventually in years to come, is to control and to reduce taxes. And in order to do that, you have to first control and reduce the reason for the taxes, and that would be freezing salaries and benefits and health insurance. Not only freezing, but reducing, because on this island, we can't afford the taxes we're paying now.
And people should know, Andrea Vecchio was one of the stalwarts who helped fight for the tax cap that is now in place. Everybody said it couldn't be done. You guys fought and got it, and now we have this proposal. I think it is a gimmick.
And you also need to realize that we started fighting for it as soon as they knocked the tax cap out of the STAR program, because we were not for the STAR program if there wasn't a corresponding reduction in the spending and the exploding costs.
And what happened is, they passed STAR. It did help to an extent, but without the cap, a lot of school districts just saw that, just like the lottery, as extra money to spend. Once the cap came in that you put in, I heard that there's been $500 million savings to taxpayers over this time. So congratulations.
We have districts here, school districts here, that are looking at zeros. Now, it makes you think, well, if they could do it now, how come they couldn't do it all those other years?
Absolutely. Hey, hold on 1 second, Andrea. Our phones are lighting up. We got Jim Morgo in our studio too. Let's go to Bob from Hauppauge, who's going to chime in, and stay with us, Andrea. Go ahead. Hi, Bob. Welcome to the show. Bob, are you with us? Bob from Hauppauge. Going once, going twice. If we're going to lose Bob, we're going to go over to Noel in Bayport. Noel, are you with us? We might be having some technical problems while Andrea's still on the line. If you guys want to call back when Andrea's segment is done, we'll put you right on the air. So anyway, Andrea, I want to get some input from Jim. The
other thing I should mention is we have a bill in the works that is addressing these problems, and we always said that the cap will only work if we have serious mandate relief.
Right. And so, we have a bill now with Mike Fitzpatrick that would go after mandatory arbitration, real pension reform, the Tri-Borough Amendment, which gives automatic salary increases. Jim, you've got the perspective of a former public servant, a former teacher for a long time. What's your feel as to where we're going with taxes here in Long Island, what can be done? As Andrea said, personnel is 70% of your budget with salary and benefits. What can happen here?
I think you need more engaged people, like you have Andrea on the phone and folks like that. One of the problems in making any decisions is the whole thing with special interests. And when people only look at through a very narrow periscope and not look at the overall effects of what their decisions are. I was a union president, and I think the teachers union has done some very good things. It's increased the quality of education a long time ago, more than 30 years ago.
Those great contracts you got in, killed on them now.
Not so great, some of them. Look, it's like anything else. A good teacher who works at the job, who stays after, who works all summer, getting better, is worth whatever we pay him or her. A bad teacher should be out of the system as quickly as possible. That's one of the problems, is that the 30-20A process, the getting rid of tenure. Some people didn't like me as a president because if I thought someone didn't deserve tenure, he or she, I wouldn't have the union defend. We would look at the quality of his work. So what's happening with taxes? It's a bigger question. Who came up with the idea of having property taxes fund education?
All right, I want to get into that. I want to ask you, Andrea, as soon as we hear from Noel from Bayport.
Issue. That's not what we're talking about.
I want to talk about should we go to an income tax. But first, Noel, can you get through to us now? Noel from Bayport?
Sure can.
Oh, hi, Noel. Thank you for joining us on Speak Out Long Island. Here with Jim Morgo. We've got Andrea Vecchio from TaxPack on the line as well. And for others who want to call in, it's 451-1039. The floor is yours, Noel.
Yes, I just looked at an open house. The taxes are $19,000.
Wow. 19, and I'm assuming that's not waterfront.
No, it's up. I was just walking to the bay, but walking back, the sign was out. So.
$19,000.
Yeah.
Just came back from Florida, where a friend of mine bought a condo for his daughter, 2-bedroom, 2-bath on a golf course. Guess what the taxes were?
$5,000.
$1,600 on cost $80,000. We're doing something wrong in this state. Let me tell you.
$19,000. That's more than I was making my first year teaching. But I'm very old.
But not your last year, Jim.
Actually, my last year I was making $35,000.
Yeah, Jim retired in 1983.
Jim,
a lot has changed.
The average now is over $100,000.
Well, I was worth more than that, actually.
Yeah.
Well, as I always say, thank God for our teachers, thank God for our police officers, and never take wrath out on them. I think the unions get a little too powerful, but even them I can't blame because they're just doing their job. I blame the elected officials.
Steve, I would say thank God for our good teachers.
Right,
thank God for our good cops.
Noel, do you have an answer? What's the answer to this, Noel?
Go south. That's a very...
What is that? Say that again?
Yeah.
What was the answer?
Go south. Move south.
Move south. Move south.
Move south.
Well, I'm not ready to do that. I'm not
ready. Me neither.
Me neither.
I'm not giving up. I'm not raising that white flag of surrender. We've got we know what the solutions are. The problem is there's not enough will to get it done. If that Fitzpatrick bill were to pass where it
will pass eventually.
You know what the real problem is, Steve? The real problem is the influence of money in our politics, that special interests, and I don't care, right, left, whatever, can buy elections. You, as a matter of fact, early on, talked about publicly funded elections.
I'm still in favor of it. And in fact, it's interesting you mentioned it. That is
I worked
in the
on
mix.
that with you, Steve, all those years ago.
I know. That's in the mix right now where the governor is pushing it. I think it's a little too high with it.
But I'm not for it anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'm for it. I think it's a little too much of a match. You put in $1 and you get $6 from the public. I think that's way too big.
The city has public financing, and look what a mess that's been.
No, it's helped.
I think it's helped. I think one thing it does do, if you're a nobody and you want to run for office, it doesn't mean you're going to be pure as snow, but you can get at least your message out now without having to kneel at the feet of a party leader or a special interest. And that's what I like about it.
You don't get anywhere unless you kneel at the feet of a party leader and the public unions.
That's now. The thing that kills me, Andrea, is the transactional nature of Long Island politics, which I see firsthand.
It's a disgrace, yes.
I will see people tell other people, well, business people, you want to get something done? Unions, you want to get something done? Buy those tickets to the fundraiser. And
hey, Noel, you're a man on the street. What do you have any thoughts on the idea of public financing, where, as the governor is saying, for every dollar raised by a candidate, the public will kick in $6 for the purposes of creating this untainted?
Oh, that's terrible.
Well, no. What do you think?
It hasn't worked well in New York City.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that's not.
But Steve, could I ask Jim a question?
Sure.
Yeah, it's about what.
But no, shut off your radio because you have a lot of reverbration back there. So go ahead.
Oh, I'm on my telephone.
Okay,
I'm on my iPhone.
Okay, go ahead. Shoot your question.
Okay, it's related to workforce housing.
Okay, I'm having a little trouble hearing you. Go ahead, Noel.
Yeah, workforce housing. Do I have? Is that any better?
Hey, Noel, I'm sorry, we're losing you, man. Call back again later. Let's go.
Steve, let me ask you something. Are you better off on a regular phone calling in?
Well, yeah, but if you're fine, you're very clear.
Yeah, well, I'm on my home phone.
Oh, okay. Well, no, it really depends. A lot of people call in to sell, but I thought he might have had his radio on because you get some reverberations, or sometimes they run their speakerphone in their car and it gets some reverberation. But most of the calls are coming in quite well.
Because a lot of people are going to want to be calling,
No, well, the phones were ringing off the hook with the Dream Act, I'll tell you that. And we had 5 of them lit up at one point. We had to go to break, and we lost a few of them.
Okay.
But let me, Jim, I want to shift gears with you, and you're welcome to join us on this issue as well, Andrea. But I was talking with Tom Barrager about the bills coming up in front of the county legislature. One of them is the smoking bill, which would require that you be 21 years of age. Rather than the present 19. It was originally 18. It went to 19. And before you can buy cigarettes. And, Tom is of the opinion, hey, you can fight in a war. You should be able to, even though they're bad for you, you should be able to buy cigarettes. Where do you come from? Where do you come down on this?
Well, on the bigger issue of smoking, the thing that's the most concerned, I believe in individual freedom, although that word freedom, as a quick digression, is misused. You hear somebody, Fox News, are going to be free. I want freedom. What the hell does that mean? It means I'm free to drive 100 miles an hour. I shouldn't be stopped. But that's a digression. The thing about smoking is secondhand smoke. People who are not making a choice to have a cigarette, it's affecting them. Secondly, most smokers today began when they were teenagers. If you came down from Mars and you saw people smoking and drinking, you'd think we were crazy by abusing ourselves that way. But why is it so tough? I agreed with Tom. You should ban cigarettes altogether. But why is it so tough?
It worked real well with alcohol.
It didn't work with
That's
alcohol.
my point. I'm being sarcastic.
Because it wasn't banned altogether.
Well, you had prohibition back in the 1920s.
But you can make an issue.
It led to the mafia.
Yeah, no, the mafia came well before. But anyway.
Well, it led to a Kennedy getting elected. Let's say that.
Okay. All right, listen, Steve, excuse me, I'm going to get off now, but let me suggest that the county legislature would have been much better off voting against that county contract, the 3 contracts for the police and the sheriffs and the detectives.
I'm so glad you bring that up.
Fooling around with this silly stuff. It's like the ban on detergents and all that stuff of years ago.
Hey, Andrea, great way to end your conversation. Thanks for joining us. But
you're very welcome.
I want you to listen.
You.
Thanks, and I want you to listen to this when you're off the air. You know, there will be hearing after hearing after hearing, as Andrea said, on this smoking bill. You'll probably have 30 people going to the microphone. You'll have every legislator pontificating on this. But when those police contracts came before the legislature, 3 of them that cost us $370 million, only one legislator spoke up for about 5 minutes and then not a peep. And then it went through 17-1.
Nobody voted no.
Well, you had one abstention, which is better than a yes, but no discussion. Fine.
Hey.
Okay. $370 million, no problem. Oh, now we're going to talk about the smoking bill. Blah, 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 blah. They can't control themselves.
And you want to know who's running things in the county and who's running things in the schools? It's the public unions, the police union, and it's the teachers union.
And big business.
And
big business, Andrea. Don't forget big business. They do it more subtly, but they do it too.
Yeah, but they're out in the open. The people don't understand the power that the public unions have over politics. And you do, I'm sure you do, because you've experienced both things in your career. But it's very nice. I'm very glad to have spoken with you.
Thank you.
And
you stayed on longer than we said we would have you, so thank you so much for giving us some food for thought.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Okay, thanks
Bye-bye.
so much.
Yeah,
but I think it does come back to the public finances.
You look at, but what's the motivation? And I don't read minds, and as you know as well as I do, a lot of legislators sponsor something as they want to get their name in Newsday or on News 12. But the motivation there is a health concern.
That's a good motivation. There's no question about that. The intentions are good.
And you got a problem. And then it's like the seatbelt law. I don't know if you remember. I think you
certainly do.
Yeah, people. You can't force us to wear seatbelts. It's like other government spending on public health. You don't have polio anymore. You don't have other several, because government spent. It was opposed. Social Security, Medicare. People went nuts. You look at some of the things that people said in '65 about socialized medicine. Ronald Reagan back then, we're going to socialized medicine. Medicare is the worst thing that ever happened. You know that quote, Steve, when they were discussing the Affordable Care Act? It was a meeting in Selden where a woman actually said, keep
your hands off of my Medicare. Keep your government hands off of my Medicare. That is true. There's a lot of information, misinformation. But, I think there are those who feel that this administration in Washington has really overstepped its bounds. I'll give you a perfect example where they're now telling businesses that you have to sign under penalty of perjury that we're going to impose the Affordable Care Act, or AKA Obamacare, on you. But if you want to say, hey, I don't want to deal with this intrusion on my business, and I want to go under the 50 number threshold, so I want to drop my employees from 53 to 49 employees, they're saying you can't do that. This is the first time in the history of this country that I could remember where a government is telling a business owner, this is how many people you must employ, and you cannot take measures to shave costs to deal with the government regulation. They're free to put in a regulation, but to tell a business that you now must employ a certain number of people, this is crazy stuff, Jim. These guys are going overboard.
I think the president's problem was that he was too much of a wimp. I think he goes to the Heritage Foundation, of all places, to get the plan. What I thought he should have done is been balls out, going all the way for his program. The Affordable Care Act is using established insurance companies. And it's nobody has any patience anymore.
Patience as far as patience,
No, not those kind of patience.
Patience like I'm a doctor's patient.
Patience is a virtue.
Okay.
Give something a time to come out and let's see how it works. People hated there are people in Congress that Obama could say, I think sunshine is a good thing. And they'd say, God, no, it's not a good thing. First time he gets elected, I'm in Sayville. A young woman says to me, can you believe what's happening to this country? I said, what? She said, we elected a black president.
Oh, that's so overblown, Jim.
No.
Twice? I mean, he was elected once, then re-elected with white voters making a difference. Listen, you got some racist jerks out there, but that's so overblown with one or two crazies out there.
That's like people telling me, you can't be talking about slavery anymore. Slavery's overgone. It's 150 years ago.
No, there's more slavery today in the world, not in the U.S., but even in the U.S., Chinese women who come over as sex
but that's
slaves.
Not my... You got to see what that's... We were the last Western country to outlaw slavery. Maybe you grew up in a different place.
What's the point of that? So the point is, we're a racist nation and we elected a black president?
I'm not saying we're a racist nation. And I'm not saying that word is overused, by the way. Racist is a word overused. I agree with you. But I'm talking about the antipathy towards the president.
But you had antipathy towards Bush. I can give you a list of the things that people said about George Bush.
Never is virulent.
Politics.
Never is.
Absolutely is virulent. Oh my gosh, with things that Michael Moore and Bill Maher.
Ever hear Michael Savage?
Yeah, no, he's crazy on the other end. You're right.
That's the problem. But that actually happened. The thing is about we had to do something about health care in this country.
Well, I agree. And I think Republicans make a big mistake in just saying we're against this, against this, against this. And
you ever hear we have the best health care in the world? You ever hear that?
If you've got access to health care, we do.
But every matrix, mortality rates, curable, life expectancy, we're like 27, 28.
Correct. That's a very good point. And we pay twice as much per patient as other places. And that's why I think President Clinton had it right. I think even this president and the Democrats have it right in saying this present system has tremendous flaws. And the Republicans in the 90s, with the commercials they did, Hillary and Louise or whoever it was. They're bragging that they stopped Hillary care. All right, great, you stopped it. What was your plan? For the next 20 years, you allowed 40 million people to remain uninsured. So I give kudos to this administration for trying to address the issue, but not the plan that they did, because right out of the bat, what did they say? Tort reform is off the table. Well, defensive medicine and these suits are a big part of your problem, but they're worried about the trial lawyers that they won't even touch it. That's what drives me absolutely
Tort reform
nuts.
Should not be off the table.
Hey, we got a call coming in. And we've got only a minute to go, so I want to get this caller in if they're with us. Okay, I think their cell phone went out, but
why does it work in Massachusetts?
I think that's debatable, but I think it's a good. The politics are crazy here. We had Mitt Romney signing it and then running away from it. The politics have really marred the debate, where there needs to be a debate. If not Obamacare, then what? The status quo is not working.
And by the way, the rollout was a train wreck. Right. I would be the first. The implementation, you got to say, and the president is a terrible politician.
Well, he's a great orator, and when he's great on some things, but he didn't make his case. Bill Clinton, the explainer-in-chief, does a much better job than President Obama. And I'm not for this program that he's got, but I think if you're going to be against it, you got to come up with an alternative. And I'll tell you, Jim, you've been a gem.
Well, I'm looking at the time. I'm saying, holy cow.
It did go fast, didn't it? Hey, folks, thanks for joining us. We want you here next week for 2 hours of conversation with the people of Suffolk County here on News Talk Radio. Thanks. We'll see you again next week. Thanks, Jim Morgo.